parallel universe, alternate reality, we all know these terms, and the idea of another universe that is similar yet different from ours is intriguing. While once a topic only found in fiction, over time the line between reality and fiction is becoming blurrier. Are there really other universes out there? It seems there is significant evidence supporting this theory. From scientific theories to astonishing personal experiences, here are 20 disturbing signs from parallel universes that no one can explain. Number 20. Exploring the infinite universes theory. Now, before we get into other alleged evidence of a multiverse existing, let's look at what science says. One of the main theories supporting the existence of multiple universes is that there are infinite universes out there, each with its own set of physical laws. In one world, you're a doctor, and in another, you're whatever you are right now. This is the multiverse theory, at least the positive part of it, which posits that the multiverse is a realm of infinite possibility. At its core, the theory suggests that there are an infinite number of universes that exist parallel to each other. These universes range from slightly different versions of our own, where maybe you chose coffee over tea this morning, to entirely alien realms where the fundamental laws of physics are drastically different. Now, I know this sounds problematic as it might lead to paradoxes, but this theory is also supported by quantum mechanics, where particles can exist in multiple states at once until they're observed, a phenomenon known as superposition. Some theorists argue that each possible state of these particles could correspond to a different universe in the multiverse, a concept known as the many worlds interpretation. Number 19. The mystery of Flight 914. The story of Flight 914 is always included when discussing time slips and parallel universes. If you haven't heard it yet, prepare to be mind-boggled. The story goes that Flight 914 took off on a clear day in July 1955. The plane, a Douglas DC-4 airliner, took off from New York City bound for Miami. It was expected to be a short flight, yet it never arrived. Instead, it vanished without a trace, only to purportedly reappear 37 years later in 1992. Many were perplexed, and air traffic controllers at Caracas Airport in Venezuela were startled by an unexpected blip on their radar. A plane was requesting permission to land, identifying itself as Flight 914 from New York to Miami, with a scheduled arrival date of 1955. Confusion reigned in the control tower. The plane appeared out of thin air and matched the model and markings of a mid-century DC-4. The pilot sounded confused, insisting it was still 1955 and that they were due in Miami, not Caracas. After landing, the crew and passengers were reportedly bewildered by their surroundings. Their attire and the aircraft were like a preserved time capsule from the 1950s. Number 18. Black holes, gateways to other universes. Now, we're probably all familiar with black holes. In sci-fi, they're usually portrayed as massive holes of nothingness that will devour anything that comes close. But what is a black hole, scientifically speaking? Black holes are mysterious regions of space-time exhibiting gravitational acceleration so strong that nothing, no particles or even electromagnetic radiation such as light, can escape from them. Even though we've known about their existence for centuries, it wasn't until recently that we captured a photo of a black hole. With that being said, we really don't know that much about black holes just yet. That's why we don't know what would happen if something or someone goes into a black hole. It's most likely that imminent death awaits the person unfortunate enough to get sucked into a black hole, but there's also the chance that they would end up in another universe. That's right. Some physicists believe black holes can be bridges or wormholes to other universes. To this day, however, this is all just based on pure speculation. Number 17. Exploring Deja Vu phenomenon. Have you ever been in a situation that feels oddly familiar, as though you've experienced it before, or even lived through it? This is Deja Vu. Surveys suggest that approximately 60% to 80% of people have experienced Deja Vu at least once. It's most commonly reported by people between the ages of 15 and 25, which might suggest that it's linked to brain development or changes. However, because science has yet to fully explain why we even experience Deja Vu in the first place, many believe it's caused by memories from a parallel universe affecting our own. Now, that's a little spooky, don't you think? Number 16. The Berenstain Bears Conspiracy. Now, the Berenstain Bears Conspiracy is essentially another Mandela Effect, albeit more renowned. The Berenstain Bears, created by Stan and Jan Berenstain, have been a staple of children's literature since the 1960s. In 2009, however, people began reporting that they remembered the name of the Bear family spelled Berenstein instead of Berenstain. Some proponents of the theory suggest that those who remember Berenstain have, at some point, shifted from a parallel universe in which that was the correct spelling, into our current universe where it's always been Berenstain. parallel universe, or a mass misunderstanding? I'll let you be the judge. Number 15. The Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect is a phenomenon named after Nelson Mandela, whom many thought perished in the 1980s, even though he was released in 1990 and even became the president of South Africa. The Mandela Effect is essentially something that revolves around a false memory. Take, for instance, the line said by Snow White's stepmother in front of her mirror. Many believe the line went, "Mirror, mirror on the wall," instead of "magic mirror on the wall." Or how many claimed that there was a brand of peanut butter called Jiffy back in the day, although the closest brand with that name is Jif. Some people believe that Curious George had a tail, when in fact he never had one. For this reason, many believe that in another universe, the Mandela Effect reflects the actual truth. After all, it's quite impossible that thousands of people would misremember things simultaneously, right? Number 14. Green Children of Another World. The green children of Woolpit are said to be children from a parallel universe, and if you know their story, this theory is quite understandable. The story goes that on a seemingly ordinary day in the 12th century, villagers of Woolpit discovered two children, a brother and a sister, with skin of an unnatural green hue near one of the wolf pits that gave the village its name. Filled with sympathy for the two young ones, the villagers immediately took them in and gave them food, and yet, strangely enough, the two children refused all food except beans and spoke in an unknown language. After years passed, however, the two children learned how to integrate themselves into the community, even learned how to consume local food and pick up the local language. Unfortunately, the boy became sick and perished shortly after being baptized, but the girl survived and fully assimilated. After learning English, she described her hometown to the townsfolk. She claimed that she came from St. Martin's Land, a place devoid of sunlight where everything was green. According to her, they followed a herd of cattle and, captivated by the sound of bells from Woolpit Church, wandered through a cavernous tunnel and emerged into our world. Her story leads many to believe that the two children were indeed from a parallel universe. Number 13. Time travel or misunderstanding. Found near London, Texas, hence its name, the London Hammer is an out-of-place artifact discovered in 1936 that many believe is proof of time travel or parallel universes. This ordinary-looking hammer was discovered encased within a rock concretion that allegedly dates back millions of years to the Cretaceous period. But how is this possible when iron tools were documented to have been created by man only in 3000 BC, millions of years after the alleged creation of the London Hammer? Well, some believe that the hammer was most likely misplaced and was covered in sediment far older than it, leading to this misunderstanding. However, some people also claimed that the London Hammer was brought by a person who accidentally had a time slip, or perhaps another being from a parallel universe, that somehow got through the fabrics of time and space. Number 12. Ong's hat, fact or fiction? Is there anyone here from New Jersey? If you are, then perhaps you've heard about Ong's Hat, an alleged ghost town that never existed in the first place. Ong's Hat emerged in the late 20th century. This town entered the public's consciousness because it was the alleged site of a radical experiment that led to the discovery of parallel universes. The story goes that in the 1970s, a group of scientists fled to Ong's Hat to escape the ethical and conventional restrictions of academia. They set up shop in this isolated spot, experimenting freely with mind-altering techniques, quantum physics, and Eastern mysticism. They then encountered an ancient device called the egg, which they modified to freely explore other dimensions. It's said that they eventually succeeded, finding ways to physically travel to parallel worlds. But is this story fact or fiction? Well, we really don't know where to draw the line. However, most people believe that it's nothing but fiction. Many see Ong's Hat story as one of the earliest internet-based conspiracy theories, propagated through a mixture of pseudoscientific documents, interviews, and narratives, collectively known as the Incunabula Papers. These documents were circulated online in the early days of the internet, but despite this fact, many continue to see them as actual proof of parallel universes. Number 11. A time slip in Times Square. Now, perhaps you've heard about this first story before. After all, it's been made famous on different sites and forums across the internet because of how utterly eerie it is. This story unfolded one evening in mid-June 1951 at about 11:15 p.m. It was a warm night, and Times Square was buzzing with life. Out of nowhere, a man appeared, clad in 19th century attire, looking bewildered amid the neon lights and roaring traffic. He was standing at the center of the square when a taxicab driver hit him. He was fatally injured, and by the time people decided to intervene, it was too late. The officials at the morgue immediately worked to identify him. What they found was quite bizarre. A copper token from a beer worth 5 cents, stamped with the name of a saloon that wasn't known by anyone in the area. a bill for the care of a horse and the washing of a carriage, about $70 in old banknotes, business cards with the name Rudolph Fentz and an address on Fifth Avenue, a letter sent and stamped in June 1876, and a medal for coming third in a three-legged race. As police delved into this mystery, a woman recognized the description of Fentz. She claimed he was her missing father-in-law, who had disappeared after going out for a smoke one evening in 1876. The description and personal effects confirmed it was him. Despite claims that this story is nothing more than a fictional short story written by a gentleman named Jack Finney, the story of Rudolph Fentz continues to be among the alleged proof of parallel universes and time slips in history. Number 10. The Phantom Time Hypothesis. Now, we've all heard about the medieval period, also known as the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. It's one of the most interesting periods in history, at least in my opinion. That's why it's so perplexing that some people believe that the Dark Ages never happened or that they happened in a parallel universe. This is what the Phantom Time Hypothesis posits, the theory that suggests we might be living in a falsified era, that the years AD 614 to 911 never actually occurred. Proposed by German historian Herbert Illig in the 1990s, the Phantom Time Hypothesis claims that the early Middle Ages were invented and created by altering historical documents and creating fictional events and figures. Why? To legitimize certain rulers or religious agendas. According to Illig, this was primarily achieved through the collaboration of three influential figures: the Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and possibly the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII. These leaders supposedly altered the calendar to place themselves in 1000 AD, a more auspicious and round number, which meant fabricating nearly 3 centuries of history. Now, that's such a huge claim. After all, this means that these three figures effectively convinced humanity of events that never truly occurred over the span of 300 years. Now, surely Illig had enough proof to support his claims, right? Well, Illig pointed to discrepancies in the dating of historical artifacts and events using various calendars, Julian and Gregorian, and astronomical phenomena like solar eclipses. He also noted architectural styles and written records that didn't match their supposed times. Although this theory is largely dismissed today, some believers of Illig remain. Number 9. Lorina Garcia Gordo, the woman from another world. What if you wake up one day and realize that your life changed a little but not entirely? This is usually the plot of fantasy novels, but this allegedly really happened to one woman. Lorina Garcia Gordo was a well-educated, 41-year-old woman. However, she had an experience that she couldn't forget. She claimed that one night in 2008, she went to sleep, but she woke up in a world that wasn't really her world. Her sheets were different, and so was her clothing, but the anomalies extended beyond mere fabrics. According to her story, Lorina found that significant parts of her life had inexplicably altered. She worked in a similar company but in a different department, under a supervisor she had never met. Her ex-boyfriend was suddenly her current partner, while her new lover, whom she'd been seeing for months, was nowhere to be found, not on her phone, not among her friends, and not at her workplace. Lorina took to the internet to share her story, expressing genuine confusion and distress. She claimed to have sought medical help, worried about her mental health, but tests showed nothing abnormal. As far as we know, Lorina continued to live in this false reality, never again waking up in her original life. Number 8. The Mystery of the Taured Man. There's no doubt that the TSA sees all kinds of bizarre things while working. However, officers working at Tokyo Airport in 1954 had one of the most unforgettable experiences when they encountered the man from Taured. Unlike other people entering the country at the time, this man of Caucasian appearance claimed to be from a country that no one had ever heard of, Taured. What's bizarre is that the man had a passport issued by this apparently non-existent nation, showing previous travels. His primary language was French, though he reportedly spoke Japanese and several other languages. When customs officials showed him a world map and asked him to point out Taured, he confidently pointed to the Principality of Andorra, appearing confused and angry when told that Andorra was not, in fact, Taured. Many initially believed that the man was lying, but aside from detailed accounts from Taured, including its history, he was also knowledgeable about international affairs, which led officials to believe that, well, he wasn't in the proper disposition at the time. His licenses and papers all seemed authentic, and they all indicated that the man was indeed from Taured. Confused, he was taken into custody and confined in a hotel, but when officials checked on him the next day, he was gone, with no signs of force used on the locks in the room. This led to claims that the man from Taured was actually a man from a parallel universe who somehow slipped into our own universe, a universe where, unfortunately, Taured doesn't exist. Number 7. Many worlds' interpretation of quantum physics. Do you know about the butterfly effect in chaos theory? The butterfly effect is the sensitive dependence on initial conditions in which a slight change in one state will affect a larger scheme of things in a deterministic nonlinear system. Basically speaking, choosing to wear red today could have triggered a string of situations that led to you being accepted to your dream job. Now, this is somehow related to the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics. Just imagine every decision you make splits the universe into a spectrum of endless possibilities. That's what Hugh Everett proposed in the MW theory back in 1957. This interpretation suggests that all possible outcomes of quantum measurements are physically realized in some world or universe. In this expansive multiverse, every conceivable alternative history and future exists. Under MW, the universe branches into multiple versions, potentially infinite, at every quantum event. Unlike other interpretations that involve wave function collapse, MW posits that the universal wave function never collapses, so every possibility is equally real but does not interfere with others. That said, this theory essentially supports the idea of parallel universes out there. Number 6. Hadron Collider breakthrough. The Large Hadron Collider, or LHC for short, is the world's largest and highest energy particle collider, with a total circumference of about 27 kilometers. This ring is buried deep beneath the Swiss-French border, where recent scientific breakthroughs unfold. Inside this colossal machine, protons speed around at near-light velocities, guided by powerful superconducting magnets. Now, when these protons collide, they create an explosion of particles, some of which have never been seen before. Basically speaking, this massive ring allows researchers to conduct experiments with Lego-like pieces. Only in this case, the said Lego pieces build up the universe. A recent breakthrough in the LHC seems to confirm the existence of parallel universes. In 2015, scientists claimed that the LHC might detect mini black holes, supporting the string theory, which posits that different dimensions could exist and parallel universes are possible. If experiments at the LHC were to detect anomalies like these mini black holes, it might suggest that these additional dimensions are real. So far, we're yet to find the answer, but shortly we might finally discover if these scientific theories will truly hold water. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. Scientists are stumped. This person was not born of Earth. This creature was allegedly discovered in a small abandoned barn in Europe, and people were perplexed about what it was, initially believing an illegal settler had found his way into the abandoned barn. Those in the vicinity contacted the authorities, not to have the man apprehended, but to help him. Imagine their surprise when they opened the barn and discovered that what was inside wasn't human, but this humanoid being with a face predominantly reptile and animal in biology. Scientists allegedly immediately responded to the scene, but even experts were stumped by the specimen. Upon arrival, the creature was already lifeless. Now, what's more bizarre is that there is no other news about this creature after being allegedly carried out for testing. Was it a hoax, or something that was being deliberately hidden? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Number 5. The double slit experiment unveiled. Now, let's get back to science, shall we? The double slit experiment is quite simple. First of all, this experiment aims to figure out whether light is fundamentally a particle or a wave. To observe this, Thomas Young performed the double slit experiment, where he passed light through 2 slits, which resulted in an interference pattern on his detector screen. But instead of seeing 2 bright lights that went through the slits, observers see different patterns, which we now know as interference patterns. This experiment was conducted again, and this time one tiny particle of light, a photon, was sent. You might think that without other light waves to interact with, each photon would go through one slit or the other, hitting the screen directly behind the slit, and yet the pattern still appeared. It's as if each photon has gone through both slits at the same time and interfered with itself. Quantum physics is quite a confusing thing, but this experiment essentially supported the many worlds interpretation, which suggests that every possible outcome of a quantum, which is the singular form of quant meaning pieces, happens in separate parallel universes. So, for our double slit experiment, this means that for every single photon, there's a universe where it went through the left slit and another universe where it went through the right slit. This alludes to the possibility that perhaps the same goes for our universe. Mind-boggling, isn't it? Number 4. Sir Robert Victor Goddards' mysterious flight. Air Marshal Sir Robert Victor Goddard, born on the 6th of February in 1897, was a renowned senior commander in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. However, his infamy for believing in paranormal phenomena sometimes surpasses his legacy as an officer. One of his most popular experiences dates back to 1935, while piloting his plane from Edinburgh to Andover. Goddard decided to fly over an old airfield in Drem, Scotland, which he knew to be abandoned and in ruins. What he saw, however, was astonishingly different. Instead of ruins, he observed a fully operational airfield, bustling with mechanics in blue overalls working on yellow planes, none of which should have been there. This sight was utterly inconsistent with the known reality of that time and place. With fatigue, it was natural to misremember things, and so he shrugged it off and continued with his journey. He only realized what he had truly seen 4 years later, in 1939, when the RAF began updating their planes to the very yellow he saw, and the mechanics' overalls to blue, just as in his vision. The once dilapidated airfield at Drem was now a thriving training hub, exactly as Goddard had seen it that day in 1935. Today, it's believed that Sir Robert Goddard is among the few who experienced a time slip or momentarily stepped into another dimension. Number 3. Is our universe a simulation? Perhaps you've heard the expression glitch in the Matrix before. This phrase became renowned in pop culture thanks to science fiction stories and that one action sci-fi movie that everyone has undoubtedly seen at least once. The phrase essentially alludes to the entire universe being just a simulation. It means that the Earth is a controlled environment created by an advanced civilization far more knowledgeable and superior than ours. Think about it. Everything you experience, every moment of existence, could be part of an advanced digital construct. The simulation hypothesis suggests that if technology continues to advance, civilizations will eventually reach a point where they can create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality. If possible, how can we be sure we're not part of one already? Some of the brightest minds, including Elon Musk and philosophers like Nick Bostrom, argue that the probability might be higher than we imagine. Bostrom's 2003 paper posits that if future civilizations have vast computing power, they might run simulations of their ancestors, us. This is quite terrifying to imagine, don't you think? Now, this theory isn't just based on speculation or fiction. Strangely enough, this theory also aligns eerily well with aspects of quantum mechanics, where particles do not have definite states unless observed. Some suggest that this is similar to how a video game only renders parts of a scene when a player looks at them, conserving resources. Could our universe be simply conserving its computational power? Now, if we are indeed living in a simulation, what's stopping whatever is controlling us from creating other versions of our world? Number 2. Mystery of the Vanishing Hotel. In October 1979, couples Len and Cynthia Gisby and Jeff and Pauline Simpson traveled through France en route to Spain. They planned to ferry across the Channel and spend 2 weeks driving through the countryside of France and northern Spain. The trip was pleasant until the night of October 3rd. The travelers found themselves on the freeway north of Montélimar, France, looking for a place to spend the night. Luckily, they stumbled upon a quaint, old-fashioned hotel after being directed away from a fully booked motel. The hotel, which seemed stuck in a past era, offered them rooms at an incredibly low price, and the setting appeared distinctly anachronistic, complete with outdated furnishings and uniformed personnel reminiscent of the early 20th century. The 4 travelers immediately noticed that the hotel's furnishings were far too old for a hotel built in the 1970s. However, with nowhere else to go, they settled into their rooms. They were only offered humble lodgings, and they noted that they saw no telephones, elevators, or any signs that it was 1979. The next morning, after a night in rooms lacking modern amenities like pillows, and with only calico as bed coverings, they continued their journey, leaving the hotel behind. At this point, the hotel was a bizarre stay over, but the mystery began to fully unravel when they tried to develop the photos they took during their stay. Strangely enough, they discovered that none of the pictures they snapped from the hotel appeared on film. Perplexed, they decided to return to the hotel, but strangely enough, they found no trace of it. The building and even the people seemed to have vanished without a trace, leading them to question if they had slipped back in time, experienced a shared hallucination, or perhaps slipped momentarily to a different universe. Number 1. Slipping into another dimension. It was a mundane day in March 2006 when Carol Chase McElhenney took her dog with her on a drive. They were cruising from her home in San Bernardino to the sheepdog trials in Paris, California. However, she quickly rerouted on a whim after seeing an exit sign to nearby Riverside, a place that Carol's family had a long history with. Her grandparents were buried in the local cemetery, and their ancestral houses were all there, most of which date back to the 1800s. Carol was familiar with Riverside. She had lived there for a while after university, after all. Or at least that's what she thought. As she drove, though, Riverside was unrecognizable. The streets were the same, but everything else was off. The houses she remembered weren't there, replaced by unfamiliar structures. Even the cemetery where her grandparents were buried was just an overgrown lot. She decided to venture further until she noticed that the town looked darker than she remembered, and the people she passed on the streets looked downright sinister. This prompted her to quickly leave the area. Now, what's strange is that years later, she went back to Riverside for her father's funeral, and everything was as she remembered from her childhood. The town had reverted to the familiar place she grew up loving. This experience made her wonder if she had slipped into a parallel universe where Riverside had taken a dystopian turn. Was it a temporary slip into another dimension, a trick of the mind, or something else entirely unexplained? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.